people go to B schools for two reasons. The placement is the most important. The second is to find a mate. When you look at B school education, which is this expensive, how does someone justify the ROI? Is there, I mean, it is not just the first placement, right? It is humanly not possible to get to reach the same level after a part-time MBA as you would do with a 2-year full-time residential program. Okay. Hi, Victor. So we meet again after a
Hello.
slightly longish gap. But
Yes.
so for today, I'd like to sort of put the cat out of the bag and say, how about we discuss the relevance of B schools going forward, or in fact, B school education going forward.
Yeah.
And the background to that is um, there are mushrooming number of B schools which are coming up, right? We've had the age-old IIMs from 4, 5 going to a very large number, almost 18, 20, right? And then there are a wide range of other private B schools also, which are also very good. And so you have these mushrooming number of B schools, and you also have a huge mushroom when it comes to the cost of a B school education, right? So from at my time when it used to cost around 3.5 lakhs for a 2-year program, right? Now it costs almost 30 lakhs for a 2-year program, right? So um, how do you how do we think, right? B school education is going to stay relevant, or is it even going to stay relevant going forward? Right. So having introduced the topic, let's see what you have to say, and then maybe I'll follow up with more comments.
Okay. Okay. I was expecting you to go first with the perspective, but never mind. Let me start. So I guess since both of us are faculty at business school, I guess our answers will be biased. I mean, let's start with that, with the disclaimer that we might sound biased, but then over the course of our discussion, we also establish why we think what we think so. So again, to start with, I guess preschool relevance will surely be there. But that's not to say that there are no risks attached to it. Okay. So, I mean, even if we see where B school education in general, right now, the curriculum, the pedagogy that is being followed 10 years back, 15 or 20 years back was pretty different actually. Right? The kind of courses that have come in, the kind of curriculum that's being there, even within the curriculum, within that, for example, a time frame of say 2 years or even 1 year in many cases, uh, the course structure, all of that have also been redefined. That's one thing. Even the timeline, right? It started as a 2 year program traditionally, right? But now it has come down to 1 year in many cases. In many cases, the part-time mode has come in, right? It's further shrinking as well. So, I mean, all of these things essentially means that it's not a very stable thing to say, okay, that this is a product that we have, business education, this is what has been for 30 years, this is what shall be for the next 30 years. It's not, because the environment outside is also changing quite drastically. Today you have technology, today you have access to information, today distribution has become much more easier. You have better quality content from the experts in the field that's available at your fingertip. So the question is that why should someone still pay quite a lot of money to get into a classroom and be part of that learning experience when they can do that sitting at the comfort of their home on the tip of their fingertip. I mean, on the tip, on a click, right? So why is it important? So I mean, these are some of the questions that we need to seriously consider, because these are the fundamental shifts that are happening. I mean, uh, the very case that there are a lot of curriculum changes happening, the very case that there are a lot of unaccredited institutions that are coming up, and there are students who are grabbing those opportunities. There are companies who are not caring anymore whether the degree is accredited or unaccredited. They just look at the skill set and the quality of the students. It essentially shows that there are some fault lines that we need to consider, especially for those of us who belong to this world of these schools, right? So for me, to start with, let me just give you a few reasons why I think that B schools are still going to be relevant. Now, traditionally, I feel for B schools, it was more about imparting business education because the awareness around so businesses were there, right? There were some specific business models were traditional that were there. The question was you needed skill, what do you call human capital to service those businesses. You needed skilled uh, manpower, or I mean, a skilled human workforce which you needed to service those businesses. So B School was a platform to train those individuals, right, in managerial implication because there's a art and there's a science to it. So that was a platform, and that was the age where you did not have so much of information around. You had books. But obviously, books, not everyone would have the patience to read it, and there's other requirements as well. So that was one thing, imparting education. Second thing was also about the network and the quality of discussion that you have in your peer group. So when you have like-minded people, smart people, like-minded people coming with a purpose to solve problem or to learn something together, there's an energy around it. There's an environment and a culture that you build around it. And you just, yeah, and through osmosis, you just do not learn from books or your faculty, you also learn from one another. Right. So that's an essential part of a B school curriculum. The third thing is that a B school also provides you a lot of other opportunities beyond just education and curriculum. It also provides you opportunities to engage in different events. It allows you to engage yourself to find your strengths, your areas of improvement through different types of exposures. Right, that has always been there. Right now also, if we talk extrapolate to today's time, a lot of these are still valid, right? But then the priority or the importance of each of these, I think that sequencing has changed. Previously, if education or business education was the topmost priority, today I do not think that business education is the topmost priority why someone comes to a business school. For me, the topmost priority why someone now comes to a business school, to my opinion, is the brand that they get. The brand, which essentially is a source of trust or a currency, which they can show and say, you know what, I have this brand, I passed order from this brand. That means I've been able to crack it, which essentially gives you some trust. So in the outside world, in the corporate, there is some acceptability, better acceptability because you've crossed some hurdles to be there. Right. So that's the first thing, right? I mean, companies do not come to hire people, companies come to a brand just because these brands have filtered out some people to get in there. Okay, so I think that's the first thing. The second most important thing is the networking part of it, right? Where you meet people, and these are the network, the social capital that you build. That is what is going to serve you a great deal in the long run. 10 years, 15 years down the line, when you need someone, essentially your peer group, your alumni of that school, right? That comes in handy, and you've seen that. So that's the second most important offering of a B school. First is a brand. Second, which opens a lot of doors for you. Second is a networking, and the third, I think, is then the education and the exposure that comes to through it. Right. Today, you can have all the books that are available, easily available out there, all the cases that are easily available out there. But then the education that you get by the sheer environment that is built in the classroom, the discussions that happen when different people come with different perspective. Think of a classroom where someone had a background in engineering, someone had a background in, say, art or say commerce, someone had a background in music, someone had a background in sports. I mean, all these diverse background people, when they come together and they look at a certain problem, the perspectives are going to be very rich. Okay, so now this is something that you cannot just replicate by reading books. You cannot just replicate by listening to people or experts. All of this has their own place, but the very way the education is imparted, the mode of the imparting of education, I think is the third most important offering that is there. Right. So I think these three things primarily, and there can be other reasons as well, but I think these three things in this very order that I said, brand, networking, and the curriculum, the imparting of education, makes B school very relevant. Okay, so this is my first take. Now there are risks to this particular structure, but before I get into the risk, I would like to know your opinion and your perspective on this.
Okay, so interesting perspective you brought in. You refer to it as brand. As soon as you said what is the most important reason why people come to a B school, and I was thinking placements, right? Because ultimately, that is what people are looking at, right? It is a professional course ultimately. You had
So
something
in
to add.
fact, as I thank you for spelling that out. So when I meant brand and it opens many doors, essentially I was implying to the placement part of it, right? But yeah,
True,
you
true.
made it more
Right. So,
explicit. Yes.
yes, I mean, and because that one needs to realize that it is a very genuine, and at the same time it is the driving force, right? There was one professor of mine that I'd interacted with who had this concept that people go to B schools for two reasons. The placement is the most important. The second is to find a mate, right? Because ultimately, when you work in the private sector, right, you go through a situation. I mean, you go through professional situations, etc., which are such that someone who's not in that industry finds it very difficult to understand, right? That why would you? Why, I mean, why are you on your laptop all the while? Why do you have to keep taking all these calls, right? But someone who's in the industry, I mean, think of explaining. Video calls like this to a doctor, right? So suppose you have a partner who's a doctor. Think of explaining why do you need to be on the call always? What is this month end pressure, right? If you're a salesperson, what is this month end pressure? I mean, you don't even come back home for 2 3 days on during the month end. What sort of work is this, right? So all those explaining to someone who's not from the industry becomes tough. So finding a partner who's also going to be in a similar setting, it does help, and B schools have played their part in that. I don't know. I mean, I haven't come across many um, couples like this from at least from my time, but then I guess things are changing and people are working on that. So anyway, moving on. I was thinking that um, I mean, continuing with what you're saying, but then there are some points that we need to consider in this discussion, right? One was the pedagogy, right? So the way B school education is being done, right? So there was a time when lecture mode and topics, etc., were used in quite a few B schools. The Harvard system of case studies is interesting, but then case studies. I mean, IMA also started with that, and now it's spread to almost all B schools. And um, the way a case study is approached, that also becomes very important, right? So whether it should just be a case study which is discussed, how do people understand the concepts behind the case study, right? If I have a course plan which is case study after case study after case study, and each case study, you would also have realized, takes up the entire session, the duration of the class. Now, where and how do I teach them about the concepts behind the case studies? What that then implies is that they should be dedicated enough to do the concepts, understand the concepts on their own, and then in the classroom talk about application of the concepts, right? But then there could be mistakes in the understanding of the concepts, which maybe while discussing the application, those can be sorted out, but that's one concern. The second topic or area also that we need to consider is the ROI, right? When you look at B school education, which is this expensive, how does someone justify the ROI? Is there, I mean, it is not just the first placement, right? Ultimately, it is the job that you move out with, but then how much are you able to sort of get in return for the education that you are getting? And is it actually worth it? Are we, there are enough people who've spoken about the lack of skills among Indian graduates, right? So is there a similar lack of skills among the MBA graduates also? Right? So are they maybe coming out with a management education but unable to apply it in practical situations, right? A third area of debate is also what you've spoken about earlier: the 1 year MBA, the 2 year MBA, and the online MBA or a part-time MBA, right? Should a 1 year MBA also be called an MBA, right? Because there are certain expectations from an MBA program that traditionally have been there. Is that 1 year concise program also? I mean, is it right to call it also an MBA? Is it right to call a part-time MBA an MBA, right? Because the sort of exposure, the sort of involvement, the sort of class discussions that a regular MBA class is subjected to, someone doing it in the online or the part-time mode, they do not actually go through that. So is it still right to call that also an MBA, right? And then placements, right? So I mean, there is if you are on, I mean, if you do follow the discussions around placements or B schools, placements happen to be one of the big schools, big discussion points. There was this recent lull in the placement season across multiple institutes, and then there was newspaper reports about everything coming back in full force. But then, are those placements the right placements? If I am in a situation where, if I'm in a B school, do I have that independence of maybe just applying to the sort of companies that I like? Or is there that placement pressure that, okay, we have to get everyone placed. So therefore, if you do not, if you're not placed within the first few rounds, then you have to take whatever placement you get, right? So therefore, moving out of a B school, are you already stuck in a straight-jacketed role? And therefore, and what you start with, it's very difficult to move out of that, right? And finally, another topic of interest. I don't know how much we'll be able to cover, right? So these were just thoughts that came to my mind while you were talking. The other topic is about ranking, right? Because I mean, and we can do a full session on this, right? Ranking is relevant. It gives you some sort of a reference point, but then it is also something that which can be very easily gamed, right? Because this is public knowledge. What are the factors being used, right? And as long as you're cosmetically maybe working on those factors, you can sort of jump a few rungs on that ranking list, right? So that also is important. Is it that you get just the best education only in the top 10, top 50 B schools, or are other B schools also um, producing good output, right? So I'll leave it at that, and maybe ask you to continue. But there is one comment I wanted to make about the peer learning thing that you mentioned, right? In my when I talk to applicants for the MBA program, etc., I tell them that my ideal visualization of a B school classroom or an MBA classroom is one which has one facilitator who is often referred to as the professor, right? And 59 approximately other teachers in the classroom, right? So that is how, I mean, if you approach a B school education with that perspective, that there is one facilitator, but then there are 59 other teachers, and you're receptive towards uh, listening to them, and there is a discussion that happens, right? That is when a B school education actually becomes successful and well-rounded. So I'll leave it at that, and we'll come to more.
Absolutely. I agree. I quite agree out there. So let's start maybe one by one the points that you say, right? And you pretty much laid out the risks also that I was supposed that I'm about to mention. So when you talk of the brand, let's start from there. I think when you talk of the brand and the placement part of it, I think you're very right. I mean, placement is one important aspect, and perhaps the most important aspect why people are ready to pay that huge amount of money to get entrance into those hallowed walls, right? And that's where the brand matters. I mean, the institutions which is I mean, how does someone make a brand in the B school space, in the business school education space? It's really, it comes down to placements. The better placements that you give and the better roles that you give, it's not just about the number, it's also the kind of roles that you're able to give. That's what makes a brand for you. It's really not, I mean, your quality of education, your faculty, your infrastructure, all of this are support activities in a way, right? The primary activity essentially, even though we might say that we are not placement agencies and all of that, but essentially that's what it is. And it comes down to that. The top question in everyone's mind is that what is the average placement package in the last batch, in the last couple of batches, or the median package in the last few batches? What is the highest? What is the lowest? Whether 100% was placed or not. So that's essentially that's what the value proposition that B schools are providing. Now, for me, I think when you talk of the risks part of it, I think that's where the important thing is there. Now, if the B school is able to give this value proposition day in and day out, and even after 10 years, I think this space is pretty safe, right? But what happens if that very value proposition gets disrupted, right? Today you have companies pretty much willing to not care really about the degree that one has. If they have the skills, if they have the required experience, they are pretty much willing to hire someone, okay, without much bothering much about the formal degree that one has. Now in such a space, okay, does the value proposition that the B schools are about tend to give, will that still hold or not? If it still holds, the question is that whether all the B schools that we have, just say in India, we have, are all the B schools able to provide that value proposition? I guess no, right? There are a handful counted ones that you can say who are actually able to provide the kind of packages and the kind of roles that people really aspire for. Correct. So for me, I see a great risk and danger to the others who are unable to give that value proposition because the market is rationalizing. And the more and more you have companies taking or are willing to onboard people, employees without the requirement of any big brand or formal education as such, provided they have the skills and say experience, I think a lot of that value proposition is at risk. Okay. I'm not saying it will completely go away. There will always the B schools will give that value proposition because ultimately they give that filter, that filtration, that trust that, you know what, we have selected, we have educated, so you can trust and give them that chance. That's what the essential value proposition is. So I think that's one risk that B schools have to think through. Placements is an extremely important part, not just the number, also the kind of roles. Okay. So engaging with corporate becomes extremely important. Going ahead, so for me, if you ask me what can be a solution around that for the kind of so there are hundreds of B schools who are unable to provide that value proposition properly, right? The placement thing. So what can be a solution for this? One solution I find is that actually bringing more in-depth collaboration between industry and academia. I mean, we tend to talk about industry, academia, collaboration and all, but these are very loose collaborations. Asking someone to come for lectures or coming for an event, coming for a conclave, this is not the kind of collaboration that essentially suits. I mean, which can derive the value for the school, right? I mean, it's good for some time to create the eyeball and give some people some sort of exposure. That's okay, but it's not what it is. I find corporate has to get more engaged in devising the very curriculum. Okay. I mean, I've seen that in Harvard and the top business schools around the world, and even the top IIMs, where you have the protagonist, the company manager or the top CEO actually taking part in writing the cases. And they're there when the case is being discussed. Right now, imagine this: when you have the CEO of the company actually seeing in the classroom who are the people, the kind of perspective that they come, it's a pretty good filter for them to see, okay, which are the people who have a nuanced filter, which who have more logical perspective to share, right? In fact, that becomes your first criteria that you've crossed before you get to the formal interview round itself. The CEO anyway gets biased. It happens a lot, right? So you need such kind of more deeper collaborations. That's one form of collaboration. Another form can be actually going and asking, talking to, for example, five companies in a given industry, ask them, tell us what kind of skills that you require when you hire graduates. We will provide that, right? We'll provide that, and also come visit us, maybe help us how do you design that curriculum, so that the kind of training cost that you put in, because every company has the training cost, we'll try to bring it down for you. Okay, so you get that mapping in a way happens much earlier, even before the student graduates, right? So when you have this kind of in-depth collaboration, if that is possible, I think those kind of B schools will have a much more, will be better position. Okay, it's a win-win situation, by the way, for companies also, for academy also. It's a win-win situation. So I think that's one thing. The fundamental thing is placement, and that value proposition business schools have to preserve. If they preserve that, rest of the things can be taken care of. That's my first thing. Second thing is the ROI part that you very rightly pointed out. The question today is that today when I'm paying 30, 35 lakh or 40 lakhs for my business school education, am I getting the kind of returns that I should be getting? Okay, so it's not about. I mean, many times people tend to calculate ROI on the very first year, like saying that okay, if I pay 20 lakhs, am I getting a package of more than 20 lakhs or not? And I don't. I think there's a very narrow way of looking into an ROI. You have to look at a much larger time horizon. So, for example, if you're paying say 30 lakhs, it might happen that you've got a job of say 20 lakhs and you don't get 30. It's okay. In the first year, you do not recover it. It might take few years for you, but then the question is that ROI is not just about earning the money back. it's also about the connection that you have made. Okay, so that also has to be part of the ROI calculation that comes in. Okay, and also the role. For example, you got a package of 20 lakhs, but the role that you got does not have much growth going ahead, or the company, and it happens a lot, right? That you can even get stuck. Maybe there are one or two more promotions, there's not much growth after that, right? Your skills, your growth gets stagnated. Now that's a problem, right? So I mean, are we able, as business schools, are we able to provide those roles to our students, to our learners, where initially they might be paid slightly on the lower side? That's okay, but is there a proper growth trajectory for them or not? That's very important, right? Whether they are able to constantly learn upskill or not. I mean, that possibility is there or not. I mean, that also should come become part of the ROI. Okay, and within the ROI thing also, the kind of cohort that you hire, and this is something that these schools have to really have to be really careful about. That ultimately the kind of people that you bring in the classroom becomes the cohort, right? And that's why they become the connection. If you do not bring good quality cohort in your classroom, ultimately you're not just doing a disservice to your brand, to yourself, you're also doing a disservice to each one. Maybe they're out of 60 students, there may be 10 or 15 students who are really good, right? They deserve that better cohort, right? Even for the others, I mean, everyone deserves a good cohort. So I think there also business school have to think that the ROI that we are providing, the cohort quality is also part of that ROI. Beyond the placement, beyond the other infrastructure and everything that I'm providing, the quality of cohort is very important. If B schools don't do that, I think that's a crisis. Those B schools, and I'm not generalizing this, the B schools which are unable to provide that value, that ROI, they are going to be in danger. Okay, so I think that's the second part where I think the risk factor, the ROI part of it, right? Now over to you to add
Okay.
any more points.
So, on the ROI, the interesting thing that you brought about was the sort of profile, right? So, you might get so suppose you spend 30 lakhs for your B school education, and you get a 30 lakh job. It is not that that is the final thing, right? I wanted to delve a little deeper into this. Uh, the important factor is once you when you're getting placed, right, with the pressure of the place com, etc. If you are getting a so suppose if you're getting a 30 lakh job, placecom is going to tell you that okay, take this job, right? Or suppose at the end of the thing you are in the you're a laggard in the class, and you're not getting your placements. So at that point of time they might say, okay, there is this financial sales company which has come, or there are a lot of what ed tech companies these days also, right? So they end up picking some of the bunch which is left over, right? Now at that point of time you might be thinking, okay, at least I'm getting maybe a 15 lakh job or a 20 lakh job, whatever, right? But the fact is you're getting into an industry, right, in which you did not have that interest, right? Because now you had to get placed, you've taken up a job that might give you 20 lakhs. So let's say maybe still had a mindset um, for maybe marketing of financial products or something, and you were good in finance. um, iBank comes in, offers you 1 CR. At that point of time you are at a loss to consider your other options, right? It is going to be a very difficult choice for you to give up that 1 CR placement and say, no, I'm going to look at joining 20 lakh job, right? So therefore at that point of time the choices that you make, right, that also sort of affects the ROI, because now you are going to be stuck at a role, a type of position. And trust me, a lot of our graduates, when they are passing out, right, they do not still have full clarity as to whether that is the industry that they really want to get into. A lot of times it is still a lucky break, right? That if you get into the industry that you want, most people who study marketing, they end up getting a sales job, right? And then once you've gotten into a sales job, unless your company is large enough and allows for some sort of lateral movement, you end up being in a sales role, right? And sales roles are, they have their own different type of pressure, right? And everybody is not meant for that sort of a role. There's some people who really thrive in it, but then most people are not, they don't react well to that pressure. Now therefore the ROI is not just in terms of the value, right? but also the quality, right? The quality of the placement. Are you getting um, what you would sort of excel in? Right. So those issues, that issue about ROI also I wanted to, or that aspect about ROI I wanted to point out. So moving on.
Yes. So any other risk that you see from your perspective, other than this two that we
Okay.
just discussed?
So one, which is continuing with that 1 year, 2 year part-time online sort of thing. I see a risk of dilution, right? Which is the 2 year program was created as a 2 year program with adequate emphasis that in the first year you're learning everything, right? You're learning things from operations to IT to OBHR, finance, marketing, everything, right? Strategy. And then after you've set a base over 2 terms, right, or over 3 terms, you then start realize, okay, now I want to specialize, and what are the specializations that I can look at because I now have that background, right? In a in the other forms, right, when it is not a 2 year program, that sort of gets crunched, or that sort of gets, I mean, adequate attention for setting that base does not happen. So therefore, those programs are more specialized programs, maybe, right? A 1 year program can be a more specialized program, but it does not create that business administration. I mean, it is called Masters of Business Administration for a particular reason, right? That you can administer a business. You have that background in finance also. You have a background in operations also, and therefore, you've become a business administrator who's now specializing maybe in finance or maybe in marketing, whatever, right? So that base, I mean, in a 1 year MBA, you'd maybe do that in a rush. So how much of that, with decreasing attention spans, I would say instead of a 1 year MBA, one should think of a 3 year MBA, right? Because attention spans among our youth are much lower, right? And can't blame them. That's the world around them. There is so much to learn, right? So maybe one should look at a even longer period, and which is where BBA, MBA sort of ends up making some sort of sense, right? That you do, if you are convinced that you want to get into the private sector, into management, do a BBA, then work for some time, do an MBA, and then maybe, I mean, that's where you sort of round off your management education. And with part time, I have some more apprehensions, right? Because it is very difficult to equate what I do in a highly distracted form, which is what a part time is. I am doing my job, I have all my job pressures, and I am staying with my family with all my family pressures also. And now you expect me to know or understand concepts and read cases, read 20-page cases and come for a discussion. That is also an overkill, right? It is humanly not possible to get to reach the same level after a part-time MBA as you would do with a 2 year full-time residential program. Right? So when I say this, I am again then maybe biased in this. I I am a strong supporter of that full-time residential program, right? That if you are not going to stay on campus, you're going to miss out on a lot of things. It is not just the fun and the parties. It is a lot of the case discussions also. It is a lot of the projects also. Projects you'd be giving your input as if you are a third party, right? So other people are meeting, you just make a few slides and send that over. Somebody collates and that becomes the project. That's not how a B school project should be. Right? So yeah, so dilution because of the time.
Right. So here, I get your point, but I would not favor a 3 year sort of
And
MBA because anyway, I think there again the ROI thing also comes in, right? I mean, I understand the attention span, but then the point is that if you make it a 3 year, it's not that the attention span is going to get better and they'll learn because of that, right? I mean, but I understand what you're saying. So, but I agree with you that 2 year MBA for me makes more sense where you set the foundation and then you go on to specialize there. Right. I agree on that part. I mean, I know there are 1 year MBA that are thriving, and there have been some top business schools in the world which have been offering one MBA for a long time and have been very successful. But I guess you again for me, the point is this, that that model would work for certain individuals who are very experienced, who have gone through the grind, and now they know how to in 1 year learn all these things together and move on, right? It's not made for everyone. And even those top B schools, they have very high entry requirement. Because they understand it's a 1 year curriculum which is very, very rigorous. So they will not just intake anyone else, right? Now, few programs can work given the requirement. But if this is something that everyone tries to get into just because it's working, and they try to convince saying it's an ROI thing in terms of money and everything, I don't think it makes sense, because the point is that these are those programs are specialized people. It would not make any sense to offer such 1 year programs to freshers or people with 1 or 2 years of experience. You need 5, 7, 10 years of experience. Then it makes sense. I understand that. Okay, that's one part. Now I think we're almost at the end of our discussion. Uh, Coming back to where we started, saying that are B schools or will B schools stay relevant? I think there's another way to also look into it. And with this, I'll just end my uh, part of it. See, till the point there are businesses in the world, business education is going to stay relevant. Okay, I'm not talking B schools yet, but I'm just saying when till the time there are businesses in the world, and that is anyway going to be there. Business models might be changing, but you will have businesses in the world. So importance of business education will be there. It's important to learn about marketing. It's important to learn about finance, HR, operations, logistics, technology, product. It's important to do that. The question is that how is this business education going to be imparted to people? Now, B school happens to be a place where that education is imparted in a very structured way, okay, with some added advantages. Now, obviously, I can be someone who can think, okay, I don't need that structured education. I don't need to pay for that. I'll read all the books there in the world. I'll talk to people who have done this, been there, done that, and I'll prepare myself. Yes, that can work as well. But then there are two issues with this. One, I might be able to do that. It's not necessary that everyone can do it, right? And education is about, there's a structure because it's about thinking of the majority. Okay, so there can be those exceptional cases, that always there are always those exceptional cases. I mean, there are so many top scientists in the world who have, I mean, we know who have not done formal education but are the best in the world, right? So that's always there, but it's not true, does not make sense for everyone. So I might be able to do that, but a lot many others are not able to do that, will not be able to do that so efficiently, right? And everything for the majority. So here B school comes, gives that value proposition, right? So I think it's important to understand that the risks are there, but the risks is not to the B school space at altogether. The risks are more for the business schools which do not, which are not properly focusing on the value propositions of the business school that a business school provides in today's day and age. Okay, I think we will see a lot more rationalization going ahead. For me, that's my perspective. B school is safe, business education is safe because there are businesses always. But if you are not a business school which understands that value propositions and are working to provide that, those business schools I think will gradually go out of business. I think that's what it is. I mean, they'll not stay relevant. I mean, getting few hundred students in today's world is not a big deal, but that does not mean you're relevant enough. Okay, so for me, that's my perspective, right? That there'll be some rationalization in this space going ahead, but business schools, as a concept, as the top institutions, they will keep on thriving as they move ahead. So over to you to
Okay.
conclude. Okay.
Yeah. So when it comes to relevance, I think I agree on that. With the large number of B schools that we have in India, right? Even if you look at the top 100, you'd recognize at least 90% of the names because those are names that you are encountering and you find them to be decently placed, right? So I don't think business education is going anywhere. Capitalism must have won the Cold War, but even under socialism you need people who can run businesses, right? So socialism or communism, whatever, business needs to run, administration needs to happen, right? So therefore B school education, with the noble idea that is there behind it, is going to stay relevant, right? So it is not that I feel there is threat from massive open online courses threatening B school education. I don't think that is going to ever happen. I mean, there were apprehensions, but I am confident that that won't be relevant. And as far as management education is concerned, yes, if you you can do a lot of things on your own. You can learn all the concepts that are required from experience, right? So if you are uh, in the industry, if you're working in the industry, you'd come across all these concepts, and you'd have your own interpretation of them, and you'd be able to apply all the theoretical concepts. You might naturally be applying most of them, right? Product, price, place, promotion, it comes naturally, right? Any good marketer would think on all those aspects. It is just a structure that has been given by someone. Now, that said, it is a difficult and a different journey when someone tries to do that on their own. But when it is structured in this form as a B school education, it does help, and that is where the relevance of B schools remain. It is in trying to find a sort of a space, or trying to shine out among the plethora of in B schools that are there, that different B schools adopt variations. Variations are good, but then it is not that a variation which has worked for someone will work for everyone else, right? There are certain fundamentals of B school education which I think will stay relevant going forward also, right? Well, that said, I think experience and education both being important. Quick data point: somebody was mentioning that most of the top B schools in the West, which were earlier considering students with at least 2 years of work ex, now that 2 year horizon has increased for a lot of the top B schools. Now it is at least 4.5 years of work ex, right? So somewhere the B school education also is saying that no, just don't think of this as a finishing school, right? You've done your graduation, did something, and then come here as a finishing school. No, you go out there, get that experience, because over 4.5 years you're actually being exposed to business situations. You are, because ultimately, if when I am in the corporate, I'd be 80% of the time I'd be doing routine things, right? But then it is those 10, 20, 15, whatever percent of situations where there is there are situations when I actually need to apply my mind. That is the thing that is compressed into the 2 year program of the MBA, right? So those experiences are what these people are trying to push people towards. So, and I guess over time in India also we'll have little more thrust towards experience before the MBA. I
Yeah,
am a big supporter of experience before MBA, because that's when it
absolutely.
actually becomes relevant.
Absolutely,
Right.
totally with you on this. I think without experience, the problem is not that people don't learn. Even freshers
They
can
will.
learn, and there are so many examples out there. But then the point is the relatability of it. That becomes more important. The classroom discussions become much more nuanced. I mean, there are a lot of benefits to it. I mean, you are more prepared as such, right? You understand situations. You've seen life slightly more, right? You understand the situation, so that really prepares. Again, it's not just about a degree at the end of the day.
True.
It's also about who you are. It's about who you become in the process.
True.
That's why it's a very immersive experience. It's unlike any other graduation or a master's program that you do. Right? It's not like a history honors. Or with all due respect, I'm not saying there's a no. I mean, I'm just saying
Yes.
that these are not these are those are subjects where you have to really learn things, understand, pass, and move on. But business school is a more application oriented, so it's a very immersive experience. So it
True.
also changes you as a person. Your outlook towards life, a lot of things change, right? When in case of case discussions, it happens with all of us. I mean, even as faculty members, when we discuss a case, sometimes in the class we tend to get a perspective we did not think while reading it before the class. So many times it
Yes.
has happened, right? So that's what makes each of us that immersive experience. So I
True.
think that's why experience really matters. I think there's something that's the reason why you have seen all the top business schools in the world always seek placements. Sorry,
True.
always seek experience before
Experience.
taking people in, right? And that also improves their employability. That also gives a trust to the employers when they come in for placements,
True. True.
right?
Agreed.
So great. I think with
Great.
this we can wind up this discussion. So I think hopefully we discuss some good ideas which listeners will have some value to take from, right? So that's it. Thank you, George, for joining in. We'll be back again with another more contemporary topic for sure.